with you. Let me simply start with the basic question. Why do you want to be president?
Chuck, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. I decided to run for president because both parties, both Democrats and Republicans, currently represent totally immoral options. For example, they both support the National Security Agency spying on all Americans without a warrant, which James Clapper lied about, and he's still going free. If any of us lied under oath, we'd be in jail. So there's always that double standard that never gets addressed. Both parties also do not seem to care that American citizens are being put in jail for victimless crimes. This means because a group of people called Congress wrote words down and voted on it decades ago, we get to put you in jail and separate you from your family if you resist. And if you don't abide by our truancy laws, well, then we'll also separate you from your family. So I really am entering the debate, hopefully, to introduce a moral landscape into the discussion. We need to stop the government double standard that currently exists. If I were to try and take money by force from someone, I'd be rightfully seen as a criminal. But when the state does it, they just call it taxation. When they engage in what could be categorized as mass murder, it's just called war. If they try to enslave us, it's called conscription. So this is something very important that needs to be introduced into the discussion. And frankly, Biden isn't going to do it. And Trump, unfortunately, in 4 years, has not really brought this issue front and center.
Well, let me ask you this. You say you're exploring right now because you want to see if there's a path to victory. This isn't supposed to be seen as some vanity project. So what metrics are you looking for to prove your path to victory? Because, look, I think in this day and age, it's easy to get the name recognition. I could picture that. But in a pandemic, you're asking the country a lot by electing somebody from a party that has never run the country before.
Well, I'm sorry, allow me to clarify my position. I'm not asking a lot. All I'm asking is that people hold government to the same standards they would hold any other person or group of people. Government does not necessarily know what's in the best interest of 330 million Americans. How much risk should we take? Well, they don't know. How much do we have in savings? How much are our expenditures? How much can we cut back? What are our obligations? How much should we be investing? Should we be taking out of our investments? It's hard for me to know that for myself, let alone do some politicians in Washington know what's best for 330 million Americans. And by the way, they're so confident they know what's best for all of us, they impose their opinions violently. So if you say, you know what, I think it's in my best interest to, I don't know, play catch with my daughter at the park or go to the beach or have my store open for a few extra weeks or maybe close late, open early. Either way, they don't know what's best for total strangers. So the fact that they are arresting people, which frankly, Chuck, let's call it what it is. If you arrest someone for a victimless crime, that is a kidnapping. If I did it, it would be a kidnapping. This is why it's so important during a pandemic. It's not that, well, we're asking people to take their attention away. It's we're introducing rationality into the discussion. As far as by what metric can I judge whether or not I'll succeed, my metric is explaining truth and objective morality to the masses in America and across the world. Hopefully, we can reach that metric sometime before things get too worse. I mean, the government's already giving us 30 million unemployed in just a couple of weeks, when even places like Sweden, who didn't have these heavy lockdowns, are not experiencing some terrible thing. I think the whole idea of the lockdown was just to flatten the curve. I don't think they ever even said, this will save lives. They just said it won't overwhelm the hospitals. So we have the graph where it's the same amount of people getting the virus and dying from it. It's just not overwhelming the healthcare system. So, people act like, I don't want people to go into terrible poverty. I want them to make their own decisions voluntarily. If you want to stay home, stay home. For some reason, that's me wanting to kill grandma. Well, they want to kill grandma for going out and trying to enjoy the final years of her lives.
It's interesting. Obviously, a pure libertarianism, a small government approach. We're in a time where there is some demand for a big government answer. Maybe these are from the same people that claim sometimes they want a small government. how would you be using the levers of power? You talked about this issue of the bailouts, and so far it's only seemed to help those with connections. There's some out there, an idea on the right and the left, of the government picking up the tab of all payrolls for a period of time. What do you make of ideas like that? Is that too intrusive of the government, or is that in line with where your head is at?
Yeah, well, you're kind of always going to have a big demand for government so long as you force people to fund and force children to attend school for 12 years that is funded and controlled by the state. Imagine if everyone had to fund the Catholic Church and all kids for the 12 most impressionable years of their lives had to attend Catholic church school. Well, everyone would say without the Catholic Church, we wouldn't be able to get anything done. They're the ones who tell us how to live, and they're the ones that make sure everything's flowing nicely. So the fact that people are, looking to government for a solution, or there is demand, well, by every metric, Chuck, at least ones that I've looked at, I'm totally open to being wrong on this. By every metric, the American people are actually extremely ignorant with regard to politics, and economics, and history, and logic, and philosophy, and morality. So the fact that people want something that they are statistically ignorant about, I don't think is a good justification. As far as what would I use the levers of power to do, I would say that I would use government as I guess sort of as a microphone to explain to people what I believe is the difference between the right way and wrong way to live in a society. I think a moral society engages in voluntary exchange, and an immoral society engages in coercion and violence that tells people, hey, I'm so sure that this guy Fauci is right about everything, I'm going to forcibly stop hundreds of millions of people from voluntarily interacting. That's how brilliant he is. It's about stopping things like that from happening, and mainly just getting out of the way and allowing people to achieve their ends voluntarily. Look at places like Sweden. We could see what works and what doesn't work, and people can make those decisions for themselves. I just oppose the state initiating violence against peaceful people during this pandemic when, frankly, they're in a much more vulnerable position than we're used to.
Philosophy of helping certain industries. On one hand, there's your basic philosophy, hey, pure free market capitalism, hey, you're on your own. But this is a unique situation. Where are you on helping the casino industry, helping the airline industry, some of these that are right now sort of, they can't run their business?
Herein lies the problem with one-size-fits-all solutions. I don't know how long people should stay home for, how sick they are, how low or high their immune system is, how much money they have saved, etc., as I mentioned previously. The main thing we need to do is stop pretending that we know what's in the best interest of millions of strangers and say, anything voluntarily you're justified in doing. For example, going to work does not initiate violence against a peaceful person. You have the right to go to work. Well, but other people might get sick, you say? Well, thankfully, I support people having the right to wear a mask if they want to, or stay in their house, or go into the basement and have your own ventilator. Whatever you think is in your best interest. What I'm against is the state saying, we are so sure this industry needs this money, we're going to forcibly take it from taxpayers, and we're going to send the bill to people who aren't even born yet, because democracy is about representing people in their interests. We don't know what these industries have on their balance sheets. And also, there's a great podcaster, Thomas E. Woods Jr., who made the point that, look, let's say the airline industry goes bankrupt. It's not that all the planes disappear. What happens is they sell off their assets and they get remanaged. So long as there is demand for casinos and people flying on planes, well, the price of those things is going to lower, and consumers will purchase them at a later time. Look, you got to be able to go a month or so. Well, at least I think you should be able to go a month or so when there's a pandemic without income. Look, but if you don't want to save, if you don't want to take the risk, who am I to tell you what to do? Also, you mentioned that pure free market capitalism is about doing your own thing, leaving people to do things themselves. That is actually false. So, for example, if you don't have something, what you can do in the marketplace is voluntarily cooperate with another person or group and get a loan. Or you could cooperate. It's not like everyone has to build their own house. Well, you can specialize in something and then exchange your money for a house. This is market voluntary cooperation where people are not just left on their own. There's billions that Americans voluntarily give to charity every year. What I'm against is coerced interactions. I'm totally for voluntary interactions. It's not about everyone has to make their own laptops and make their own TVs and, make their own mouses. Well, what you do is you specialize in something and then you trade with everything else. This is how we cooperate as a society, not by the state violently imposing their will on millions of strangers because politicians who we know are statistically dishonest liars tell us, oh, well, this is the law and this is what we have to do. So yeah, that is what I would do. Is there anything I missed there? I think you said about helping industries in general or bailouts. I don't believe in bailing anyone out coercively. I think sometimes people need help to get off their feet if they want to have a GoFundMe, if they want to go look at investors, whatever. Just make it voluntary. That's all I say, because you have to give people the option to opt out. It's not like, oh, the horse and buggy industry is going belly up, got to bail them out. Oh, the agriculture industry is shrinking, we got to bail them out. Blockbuster is failing, we got to bail them out. Sears, we got to bail out Sears. Look, sometimes it's about letting things fail and allowing resources to be allocated to more desirable ends. Just against violence. That's my only thing. I'm not anti-cooperation. I'm not against helping people. I'm against the initiation of violence against peaceful people, Chuck.
All right, two sort of hardcore political questions. Number one, the Libertarian Party needs to petition to get on approximately 14 or 15 states, depending on whose site you believe, about how many states the Libertarian Party has access to. This is not an environment where you can go and get petition signatures. Can you get on all 50 state ballots? This seems to be a legitimate hurdle for you.
Well, Chuck, if there's one thing the 2016 election taught me is that I need to be a little more humble with saying, well, here's what's realistic during an election. I mean, I'm really not sure. Instead of playing the psychic game or, what will people do under certain conditions, I never would have guessed that the small government Republicans would be supporting a multi-trillion-dollar bailout. But then again, they did it under Bush, so stupid of me to think that they would support that. I guess I never thought that, in response to something that had like a 0.2% death rate, they'd shut down the American economy and places would be starving. So look, I have no clue what the future holds. Best thing I can do is hope for people to embrace these ideas, and possibly that will reflect onto something like being on the ballots in 50 states. I have no clue who calls the shots. I'm about spreading ideas and hopefully people embracing them on principle, and hopefully maybe not this election, maybe in a future election, they will be represented on ballots because there is such demand for the ideas in general.
Since you want to be a winner, if you thought you were going to be a spoiler and you thought you're not a fan of President Trump. We know you're not a fan of Joe Biden, but you were such not a fan of President Trump, you left the Republican Party, voted to impeach him. If you thought your presence made it easier for him to win a second term, but you couldn't win, what would you do?
Well, the reason that I supported impeaching President Trump is, well, I guess I would pretty much support impeaching all Congress people, considering they don't abide by the Constitution or the non-aggression principle, something I hold as more moral than the Constitution. President Trump, November 20th of 2018 on whitehouse.gov, said that he will continue to support the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because they purchase things from defense contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and Boeing. What these weapons are doing is actually assisting a mass murder campaign in Yemen against a civilian population in hopes of them getting so upset that they'll take it out on their current leaders and engage in regime change, just like the U.S. did after the Gulf War throughout the 90s under Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr. I absolutely think the president and, like I said, most members of Congress should be impeached. As far as would I hurt President Trump's chances of winning? Probably, and that's probably a good thing because these two socialists who believe in very big government and regulation, they both support the drug war, they both support the NSA spying on us, they both support this FBI and CIA that are completely corrupt, and even when it comes out, you know, General Flynn was set up, well, they're like, oh, I really hope they fix things over there. No, talk about needing to let someone go out of business. Well, of course, they're always going to be bad because they're consumers are coerced consumers. They don't have the ability to opt out. So I'm sorry, I'm straying away from this question. But look, if Trump loses, that just means a socialist lost. And the Second Amendment people who pretend to believe in small government, need to stop saying that, well, anyone who puts an R next to their name will call them small government, you know, because that's pretty much the only standards we have. We actually have to embrace the ideas of what makes government a unique institution. It initiates violence against peaceful people under the guise of law and order or war or conscription or taxation or regulation. We need to embrace those ideas, and even if it means Dementia Joe getting a couple terms in there, well, hey, we had Bush Jr., where the vice president ran things for 8 years, so maybe we'll have that again with Joe Biden.
I'm sure you've already heard 17 different angles of how your candidacy helps in 17 different ways or hurts in 17 different ways. I can argue it from any side. I know exactly what you mean. Congressman Amash, good luck. Stay safe out there, and we'll be watching.
Hey, the number 17. That reminds me of when the New York Times said there were 17 intelligence agencies that all confirmed that Russia interfered in our election and we have to be terrified of the Russians. And, oh, we have to be terrified of racism. Oh, and we have to be terrified of Charlottesville. No, the enemy is the state. Chuck, thanks so much for having me on. And please, I just ask everyone to hold government to the same standards we'd hold any other institution. Taxation is theft, war is mass murder, and the draft is slavery. Thanks for having me on, Chuck.